as our bat mitzvah described, the metaphor of Judaism and dance is actually quite accurate. If you think about hip-hop being the more liberal side of our tradition, and forget about me for a second, but ballet being the more traditional, it does work, and it's important. And part of the problem is we don't think of our tradition in those terms. We don't think of our tradition as being wide enough to encompass so many different possibilities. And I'm going to give you an example. But before I give you the examples, people, I think, basically know that I do not like Walt Disney. There are some things that Walt Disney has done that I think are wonderful. But the whole concept of Disney taking fairy tales or stories and making them into a Disney production is problematic because you lose the origin and the original meanings. And the best example of this, as I've used before, is you know that Jiminy Cricket does not survive in the story of Pinocchio. He's murdered. Yeah, for real. I know, did I ruin it for you? Wait, it gets worse. Who killed him? Pinocchio killed him. In the original Italian fable, Jiminy Cricket is killed by Pinocchio because no one likes a critic. Okay, now we can finish the service. So, and what did Disney do? Disney gave Jiminy Cricket a tuxedo with a star and made it into a very lighthearted comedy, so to speak, when that was not the original intent. And I could go on and on and on, but I saw some of the faces of some of you, and I really would enjoy doing it, but it's not worth it. But the same thing happens with the Ten Commandments. I mean, I know that no one here is old enough to have seen the original Ten Commandments by Cecil B. DeMille or even earlier. I had to wait on that one. So I know you haven't, but most of us know about the Ten Commandments based on the movies or the cartoons. But there are some problems. And because we look at the way in which Hollywood or Disney dealt with all of this, or Pixar, I know. But because we look at them that way, we miss the nuance of the text. And the text is so beautifully nuanced. I'll give you an example. I am the Lord your God. I'm not speaking for myself, I'm quoting. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. That's the first of the Ten Commandments, correct?
You're missing something.
I am missing something. What am I missing?
The house of bondage or
house of bondage, okay.
And the very strange, no other gods, all
Well, that's the second one. That's the second one.
Right.
We're just on the first. Are there any English teachers here? English majors? I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the house of, I can quote the Hebrew much more easily than the English.
Out of the
right, from the land of Egypt to be your God. Now, is that a commandment? No, it's not. It's a statement. And in fact, in Hebrew, that's translated as 10 Commandments, actually in the Hebrew is the 10 statements. But we're not going to deal with that because we have to get to the Kiddush at some point. So, but the first line that we normally consider to be a commandment is not a commandment. And by the way, I'm only quoting the tradition. There is a real argument in the tradition that goes back 1,000 years or more as to whether that is a commandment or not. Now, if it's not a commandment, it's just a statement, then it takes on a whole different reality. And in fact, all the commandments take on a different reality. Because one of the most common questions I am asked, especially with the teens in my class, is, do I have to believe in God to be a Jew? And the tradition says, no. Because I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt is not a commandment. Now, it's a foundational statement, logically, and it goes on from there. But think about how what we've been taught, or what the rabbis are teaching, don't tell anyone, what the rabbis are teaching is that you have to believe in God, and the fact is you don't. And it changes the whole idea of Judaism. It opens it up to hip-hop versus ballet. But I'd like to focus in on something else. What was the purpose of the giving of the Ten Commandments? Does anyone know? To create a structure. Good answer. I'm sorry?
Holy nation and a kingdom of priests.
Holy nation and a kingdom of priests, to create that. According to the tradition, if you were going to a yeshiva right now, one of the answers would be both of those, and because God gave all the commandments at Mount Sinai. That is traditional theology. So I ask you, did God give all the commandments at Mount Sinai? By the way, for those of you who are guests, we're not going to Kiddush until we get this done. Did God give all the commandments at Mount Sinai? By the way, you know the answer is no because of the way I asked it. But what commandments were given before Mount Sinai? Circumcision is one, that's right.
Several of the laws relating to Pesach.
Pesach is given before. I mean, how did they get out of Egypt? I'm sorry? The Noahide laws, which are 7 of ours. Be fruitful and multiply. It's the first mitzvah given in. Now, if all of the, and by the way, this is a question that's asked in medieval Judaism as well. If all of the commandments are not given at Mount Sinai, then the purpose of Mount Sinai was not to give the commandments. So the question then is, what was the purpose of Mount Sinai? And what happens, the difference between Mount Sinai and everything else that happens is that it happens to the entirety of Israel. That the revelation that there is a God is very interesting because it comes to everyone. Now, you may believe in the veracity of the Bible or not, but what is acceptable, and not only that, but has to be accepted, is that for thousands of years we believe, and many still do believe, that the revelation at Sinai came to everyone, which means that no one person is better than another. And that is nuance. The revelation came to everyone. So is it possible that the purpose of the revelation at Sinai is simply to show everyone that God is accessible? And if you doubt this, then just see the film, Oh God. Because if you remember that film, George Burns says to not Bob Denver, the other Denver, John Denver, right? When asked, what do you want from me? What message? God just says, tell him I'm here, that I exist. And I would submit to you that if we just all recognized that that is the message of the book of Exodus, whether we believed in it or not, it would change our view of our tradition because it makes our tradition much more accessible. The Ten Commandments and the commandments themselves were not meant to divide us. They were meant to give us structure. They were meant to create community. They were meant to do a lot of different things. But the observance of the commandments is not necessarily part of what the commandments are there for. And I know that that may sound very, very hip-hop, but it's actually much closer to the ballet.